You're lucky. Watching live sports never used to be this easy. Running up and down that field looks tough.
It's a pitch.
Get way more into what you're into when you stream on the Xfinity 10G network.
Hello, everyone, and happy week 2. Welcome into Inquire Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Tonight, we are coming to you live from the press box here at Lincoln Financial Field, where in a little bit, the Philadelphia Eagles will host the Minnesota Vikings in their home opener. I'm Eagles beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, Josh Tolentino, and I'm pleased to be joined by my fellow beat reporters and co-host of Gameday Central, Olivia Reiner and EJ Smith. Olivia, how's it going?
Everything is great. The weather is beautiful, so much more beautiful than it was in Foxborough. It was rainy. It was a gross week on Sunday. It's a much more beautiful day here on getting ready for Thursday Night Football.
EJ, Olivia mentions New England. We were just there 4 days ago. The Eagles with a quick turnaround tonight. The first game of the NFL scheduled this weekend. How are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, Josh, during these short weeks, you really got to prioritize your recovery, your rehabilitation process. So I've been doing lots of sitting around, lots of relaxation. Not really, doing a lot of prep work for the game. But I'm excited for the, primetime matchup. We're going to have a lot of these night games this year. So excited to get it going.
All right, let's get it going then. Throughout the season, we'll be coming to you live before every single game to tell you what you need to know about these Eagles. EJ, where is the best place that our viewers, subscribers, our readers can find us?
Yeah, Josh, inquire.com/Eagles Game Day is where we want to hear from you. We're going to be there throughout the game, putting our analysis in there, letting you know what we see from the press box. And we want that to be a two-way conversation. We want you guys to let us know what you're thinking at home and, what the broadcast might be talking about. So, again, make sure to head over there. And even later in the show, we're going to take some of those comments and do a segment called What You Said. It's one of my favorites every week. And, really want to make that a two-way conversation. So once again, it's inquire.com/Eagles Game Day.
All right, guys, let's jump right into it. A lot to talk about, a lot to discuss about this Eagles team as they host the Minnesota Vikings in their home opener here in week 2. Olivia, you mentioned it earlier, a bit sloppy weather, a bit sloppy performance. The Eagles in their season opening victory against the New England Patriots, against Bill Belichick. The Minnesota Vikings, they come to town coming off a surprising week 1 loss to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Let's stick with the Eagles, though, and I think we have to begin with Jalen Hurts, with Brian Johnson, the new offensive coordinator. What were your observations in that victory? It felt like they snuck away there from New England, coming back here 1-0.
You used the word, Josh. So did Brian Johnson. Sloppy. The offense was sloppy. Sloppy game, sloppy weather. They jumped out to a very nice, convincing lead, 16-0 early in the game. However, went 4 consecutive drives, 3 and out. That was a perfect opportunity for the Eagles to continue to assert their dominance over the Patriots. Instead, they came up pretty soft and short. So this is going to be a really important game to show that they can bounce back. The Patriots defense is a very talented defense under Bill Belichick. They are consistently in the top 10 in yards, in points for I think the past decade, the past 11 years or so. So there's a chance that the Patriots defense could be the Patriots defense that we've known of the past this upcoming year. However, the Vikings might not exactly boast that same sort of formidable defense as the Patriots do. So this could be an opportunity for the Eagles to show that, hey, that we were a pretty good, dang good offense last year for a reason. So we'll definitely have much higher expectations for the offense rebounding off of a quiet and, as you mentioned, sloppy week 1.
It wasn't just a debut for one coordinator, but 2 coordinators, EJ. Sean Desai also making his debut in his role with the Eagles. There were certain points where it felt like Mac Jones was dicing through specifically the middle parts of the field. But when it came down to when it mattered most, EJ, they came down in the clutch. The defense came through. Consecutive turnovers on downs for the Patriots at the end of the game. Josh Jobe came in, filled in. We'll certainly discuss injuries the Eagles are dealing with a handful here very soon, but the Eagles still got it done again when it mattered most with Sean Desai making his debut.
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned it, like the middle of the field defense. I think that was a concern going into the year, and I mean, it kind of bore out in the first game. The linebackers struggled in coverage. I thought N'Kobe Dean had a nice day against the run, but especially once he was hurt, they really started to struggle at that spot, and then at the safety spot. I think you saw the Patriots kind of target Justin Evans and try and get his eyes where they weren't supposed to be, and I think they had some success. They really did. They targeted the safeties and the linebackers, and I think that might be the template for how the Eagles defense looks this year. Is the pass rush is going to get home. They have a lot of impactful rushers both from the interior and on the edge. Which might invite some volatility, some turnovers and some sacks, and that's going to be the way they get off the field. But if that pass rush isn't able to get home, I think that the spine of the Eagles defense, the linebackers and the safeties, are prone to give up some big plays and prone to give up some prolonged drives. I think we saw that against the Patriots, and I think we're going to see it again tonight against the Vikings. They have Justin Jefferson, obviously. They also have TJ Hawkinson at tight end. I think, they've got some guys who can really exploit that middle of the field. And again, I think that's something we're going to see a lot this year. And it's really going to be a question of whether or not the Eagles pass rush can kind of wreck the game like we've seen them do so many times in the last few years.
Olivia, let's jump into injuries. EJ mentioned N'Kobe Dean. Who's hurt? Who's healthy for this team? The Eagles were very, very healthy heading into week one. They come into week two, though, with what feels like a laundry list of injuries. Let's bring to the surface four of them. EJ mentioned N'Kobe Dean. He's actually on IR, so he will miss tonight's game and the following three games. He's going to be out a month. That really, really hurts, Olivia, when you not only did N'Kobe Dean wear a green dot, but big expectations for that day two pick from last year heading into this season. What is going to happen here at linebacker? Is Christian Ellis the proper solution? Zach Cunningham also struggled specifically in coverage last week.
That would make the most sense that we would see Christian Ellis in that middle linebacker role to fill in for N'Kobe Dean this week. That was essentially, that is his role, and that was what he did when Dean did exit the game on Sunday. We saw more, that was it. Those were the only two options that the Eagles had in Zach Cunningham and Christian Ellis. So our expectation is that we'll see them yet again. However, they also now have the ability to bring Nicholas Morrow onto the field. He was elevated from the practice squad to the active roster. So they've got three inside linebackers coming into this game at their disposal. Morrow did not make the initial 53-man roster out of camp. Eventually, he was signed to the practice squad, and now he is in a position to potentially make an impact. So, listen, this is the kind of game that if you're looking to make your mark, to turn heads, to show the coaches that, hey, you can trust me, this is your opportunity when the starters or a starter in this case is out. So, I would expect to see more of Christian Ellis. With him potentially, again, wearing the green dot, he would be a prime candidate considering the fact that he and safety Reed Blankenship split those duties once Dean came out of the game last week. Blankenship, as we're about to discuss, is not playing today. So that would mean that Ellis would make the most sense in being the front runner for the green dot duty.
EJ, not just N'Kobe Dean, Olivia hinted at it, but the Eagles missing two key parts of their secondary. All-pro cornerback James Bradbury, he is out in the concussion protocol. Reed Blankenship, like what Olivia mentioned, also out with a ribs injury. What's going to happen there in the secondary, EJ, against primetime Kirk Cousins? Kirk Cousins' performance in night games is very well documented in terms of poor outings, but he's still got a ton of weapons, a ton of speedy options there with rookie Jordan Addison, KJ Osborne, and everyone knows Justin Jefferson is going to be a one heck of a matchup to watch. Him and Darius Slay. We all know what happened last year with those two picks, but the Eagles again dealing with injuries at secondary with James Bradbury and Reed Blankenship.
Yeah, I mean, at cornerback, it's pretty easy to project. I think Josh Jobe will be in James Bradbury's spot in the secondary. I'd expect to see Darius Slay follow Justin Jefferson a good amount tonight. But, there's going to be limitations to that. I mean, is Darius Slay going to follow Justin Jefferson if he goes in the slot? What if he's in motion in the backfield? There's a lot of options the Vikings can go to. And on the other side, I mean, Josh Jobe is going to be matched up against Jordan Addison. Jobe's an interesting one. I mean, he's looked good in camp. But there's a difference between looking good in camp and looking good on a primetime game against, a high value, a high pick at wide receiver in Jordan Addison, who had a good NFL debut last week. So that's going to be a tough matchup. And again, like I think that the Vikings can put up points today because of that matchup, and also like I mentioned earlier, the safeties. As far as Blankenship replacing him, I think you're going to see Justin Evans like you saw last week, and then the question is, do you see Terrell Edmonds? Do you see Sidney Brown? Do they just how do they kind of compensate for that? I was surprised last week to see them use so many 5-2 fronts, two linebackers on the field. We saw this team kind of go toward more 5-1 fronts with one linebacker a lot of the time last year, which makes sense if you look at their personnel just because they are so thin at that position. I think you might see some snaps with Terrell Edmonds as like a dime linebacker this game because we saw him do it a lot during training camp, and I think his personnel or his skill set fits that. So I think it's going to be Terrell Edmonds. I think it's going to be maybe a little bit of Sidney Brown, but I think that based off the fact that he wasn't the week 1 starter, especially with as bullish as the team is on him, I think they probably think he needs a little bit more time. So definitely a big question mark going into the game. I think it's one of the biggest questions at this early point in the season. And again, I think that there's a chance that the Vikings will be able to put up points.
All right, guys, continuing the injury conversation, the Eagles just dealing with so many injuries this week. Fletcher Cox also dealing with his own ribs injury. The expectation is that he should attempt to suit up to play. We've seen him here right in front of us right now on the field warming up. Fletcher Cox was actually pretty impactful in last week's game. We saw Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, get their first career sacks, but Fletcher Cox, I believe, according to Next Gen Stats, generated the most double teams in the league in week 1. He's going to try to suit up today. One more injury I want to go to, Olivia. Running back, everyone was so curious. I mean, it was such a big question who was going to replace Miles Sanders as the lead running back. Nick Sirianni throughout training camp, Jamal Singleton, the running backs coach, insisted it was going to be a committee approach. And the first one to take the snap, and not just one snap, he got a career high 18 touches, 14 carries, tied his career high. That was Kenneth Gainwell. Unfortunately for Kenny, he is also out with a ribs injury. Olivia, what happens in the backfield? I think the obvious answer would be DeAndre Swift. Rashad Penny also expected to be up after being inactive in week 1.
Yes, that is my expectation as well. Kenny Gainwell, I mean, what a bummer for him to have as strong of a game as he did. He, very few explosive plays in that game against the Patriots, and he had a 16-yard run, which is one of the longer plays of the game. We really didn't get to see as much of DeAndre Swift as I think we were all anticipating. He only had 1 carry for 3 yards, and I think he had he's got 2 targets for 1 reception, 0 yards. So it was a quiet game for him overall. I would expect that he deserves to be more of a part of the plan today. It's not to say that he wasn't. Perhaps it didn't shake out the way that they wanted it to on offense for getting the ball in DeAndre Swift's hands. But now that Penny will be up, but now that Gainwell is not playing today, perhaps that means that there is going to be more of a role for Swift in the backfield, but also expecting to see him line up as a receiver. And that has clearly been the preference for him throughout training camp, is getting him at the line of scrimmage and lining up and serving as a receiver. But I would expect to see also more of Penny today. Obviously, Boston Scott expected to be active as well. So the Eagles will have 3 running backs at their disposal. A little bit more of a secure plan there, I think, on offense at the running backs position, missing Gainwell there at the top than they are currently at, inside linebacker, for example, safety, where the depth just isn't necessarily there. So certainly something to keep an eye on. But I think if I'm an Eagles fan, my concern probably lies a little bit more with the defense in today's game.
Olivia, really quick, throwing it right back to you. You mentioned the lack of touches there for DeAndre Swift. Nick Sirianni's quote is specifically, he said, we can't get through a game with DeAndre Swift only getting 2 touches. I can't believe we got this far on the show, but Dallas Goedert also 1 target, 0 catches in week 1. You'd expect those numbers to change really quick as Brian Johnson gets more accustomed to the game day flow.
Absolutely. Again, you want to get the ball in the hands of your playmakers. Dallas Goedert is a playmaker. Finished in the top 3 in yards last season, just behind A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. And you look back to last season, and Goddard talked about this during the week too, and Devontae Smith was in a very similar position coming out of week 1 against the Detroit Lions, where the Eagles barely kind of squeaked by. Also a similar scenario again with the victory. He did not have a single reception in that game. The following game, week 2, coincidentally against the Vikings, Smith gets the first reception of the game, ends up having a very strong game. And then the following week, even week 3 against the Commanders, had the best game of his career to date. So over 150 receiving yards, had a touchdown. So, hey, Goddard, week 1, put it behind him. I'm sure he's looking to get the ball in his hands tonight.
All right, EJ, we finally got through the Eagles' injury list, their lack of touches with DeAndre Swift and Dallas Goedert. What's going on with the Vikings? Last week, they allowed the most interior pressures in the NFL against that Buccaneers defense, and now they get a tough tilt with Milton Williams, Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Fletcher Cox. What is going on there with the Vikings?
Yeah, Josh, the Vikings interior line is already pretty banged up. I mean, it's funny because like against the Patriots, I feel like the one thing in the back of my mind when I'm watching, Jalen Carter, Fletcher Cox, and Milton Williams, Jordan Davis, all these guys, just completely dominate the game in there. It's like, well, they're going against 2 day 3 picks that were backups, and the Vikings offensive line isn't in much better shape than the Patriots was. Garrett Bradbury is inactive today; he's out with a back injury. Christian Darrisaw, the starting left tackle, he's questionable with an ankle injury. The indication, it seems like he's not going to play, although he's not listed in the inactive. So I think we're going to have to just see if he's in the huddle in about 90 minutes from now. So, I mean, it really is an opportunity for this Eagles defensive pass rush to impact the game. I think it's just going to be a matter of, like, especially with Kirk Cousins, somebody who has a tendency to be turnover prone and just struggles a little bit more against pressure than some other quarterbacks. He's not able to create too much and not really able to get off of his spots as much as maybe some other quarterbacks. So definitely a big opportunity for the Eagles pass rush to make their mark tonight.
The Eagles finished with 2 sacks last week. Jalen Carter had his first sack, and then Josh Sweat and Jordan Davis combined for a sack. Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat, Brandon Graham, it felt like they were almost, if almost sacks were a stat, they had a handful of those in last week's game. We'll see if they're able to get home tonight against Kirk Cousins. Guys, let's transition over to our favorite segment. It is called What You Said. A reminder to all of our viewers back home, you can submit your comments and questions over at inquire.com/Eagles Game Day, and we'll have a chance to read them here in this segment called What You Said. Our first comment comes from Eagles PDX, who says the Patriots lost the game. The Eagles did not win. Drop passes by the Patriots are what saved the Eagles. Olivia, dissect this one really quick. As Nick Sirianni said in the locker room, as they were blasting Return of the Mac in their celebration mode, a win is a win. And that was an ugly win, as you opened the show with.
Yeah, I hesitate to say that the Eagles didn't win because, I would maybe the Eagles offense didn't win. They certainly didn't win them the day, but at the end of the day, special teams is part of the Eagles. The defense is part of the Eagles, and so is the offense, and they combined to beat the Patriots. It certainly wasn't, like we mentioned earlier, the outing that the Eagles offense wanted to have. It wasn't an impressive outing. You never want to come out of a game only having scored 1 touchdown. Jake Elliott was pretty phenomenal, going 4 for 4 on his field goals. 2 made field goals of over 50 yards. He had a stellar day. He was named NFC Special Teams Player of the Week. And the defense even chipped in some points too with Darius Slay's pick 6. So yes, it was not a beautiful win. The Eagles did win, and they're going to have to figure out a way with all of these injuries on defense to find a way to just emerge as victorious this week. It's going to be tricky against this Vikings, especially their passing attack, but you got to find a way.
Yeah, you got to find a way, and it also should be noted with an asterisk. Week 1, it's just such an anomaly in terms of what you expect and what actually happens. As we get some more continuity here with Brian Johnson and Sean Desai in the home opener, week 2 against the Vikings. Our next comment comes from Dean W7, who says, last year, 2 factors played a large part in the Eagles' success. Number 1, the other teams did not know what to expect from the coaching staff. Number 2, the Eagles had a very weak schedule of opponents. EJ, I'm throwing this one to you. I wouldn't necessarily agree there with the expectations from a new coaching staff. Jalen Hurts, it was more so it was his he burst onto the scene with his MVP runner-up season. Shane Steichen calling the plays for him. Focusing on the second part of this comment, the Eagles, very weak schedule opponents. That is not the case this year. According to all of the advanced analytics, no matter where you look, the Eagles have the toughest schedule in the NFL, obviously coming off that Super Bowl loss.
Yeah, but it is a little bit like there's a lot of variance. Like there's a lot of really good teams, and then there's a lot of teams that they should be able to win against. When you go through their schedule, you can find double-digit wins pretty easily for them, just because there are a lot of games that they should win. Like last week and kind of like this week too. But there's that stretch after the bye week where it's Chiefs, 49ers, Cowboys, Bills, and you're all not in that order for the record. But you're looking at that group, that 4 or 5 game stretch, and it's like, man, that's a slog. So yeah, definitely going to be a tougher schedule this year. To the point about the coaching staff, I think that more than anything, like what I'm kind of curious to see throughout this year is the evolution of what defenses try to do to stop Jalen Hurts in this offense. They've got a full year of tape on what works for them and what works against them. And I think that the Patriots kind of illustrated a little bit, like some creative looks that you can give. Man to man on the outside with a lot of zone match scheme on the inside. Stuff like that. I mean, Brian Flores is probably very familiar with that. I think when you look at how he schemed against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers last week, it was more zone than I think we're used to seeing from Brian Flores in his previous stops. A lot of blitzing, and that's something that's worked against Jalen Hurts in the past. It's something that he's gotten better at dealing with. But I expect the Vikings to blitz him a lot. I expect there to be some chaos out there, and I think that's going to be a big test for the Eagles offense. That's like once you have an elite quarterback, that's kind of like the cat and mouse game that you deal with. In the NFL is defenses trying different things and then finding something that might work. And then you have to prove that you can beat that. And then it starts all over again. So, it's going to be a fun thing to monitor throughout the season. And I think, we're going to see it here tonight.
EJ, as someone who's covered Brian Flores before during his time with the Dolphins, I'm expecting to see a lot of cover zero tonight and see, if Jalen's able to use his mental, to throw a story up, Olivia's season preview story on Jalen Hurts as a triple threat, but we'll see exactly how Jalen Hurts reacts to what Brian Flores throws at him. Again, as we noted earlier, Brian Flores spent a lot of time in New England with Bill Belichick, their week 1 opponent. Olivia, our last comment comes from A. Bruce 254, who says, is Slay really going to shut down Justin Jefferson again? That D-line better be in Cousins' face every single play because there's hardly anyone to cover those receivers. I'd argue that they're not necessarily everyone to cover those receivers, but certainly some tough matchups. They've still got Avonte Maddox, Darius Slay out there. A lot of questions at the middle parts of the field. How exactly do you expect Darius Slay to play tonight, Olivia? He had mentioned earlier in the week that he's down for whatever Sean Desai's game plan is. Sean Desai was asked, his philosophy on traveling corners, was very coy in his response. It's based it on the matchups. This certainly seems like one that would make sense.
If it worked last year, you might as well try. I know that it's not going to be possible, as EJ mentioned earlier in our show, to have him shadow or just kind of follow Jefferson around the field all night long. But last year, he was very successful, limiting Jefferson to 3 receptions for 14 yards. He picked off Kirk Cousins twice. I mean, if I'm Sean Desai, I'm looking at Darius Slay and saying you were able to really limit the 2022 offensive MVP, essentially. I think that it would make sense for the Eagles to try to go back to him. However, are they going to try to be deceptive about where he's lining up? Or are they going to move him around a little bit? Is it going to make that? It's going to make it a little bit more challenging for Slay to get on him. So they're going to have to rely on their secondary. They're going to have to rely, Josh Jobe, I'm sure will have his chances to go up against him in coverage too. And we're going to learn a lot about Jobe tonight. There's a reason why he made the initial 53 2 years in a row as an undrafted free agent. And we'll understand more as to why that is, because we've seen a lot of great reps in training camp, good reps in practice, but not those live in-game regular season reps. So tonight is his night to show that he can be at least a solid backup.
All right, let's get over to predictions. But first, let's go over to the Inquirer's Jeff McClain for his thoughts on tonight's game.
Hi, I'm Jeff McClain of the Philadelphia Inquirer. Thanks for joining me here at Gameday Central to talk about the Eagles game against the Vikings, week 2, second time in as many years that the Eagles will be facing Minnesota in week 2. Now, different circumstances than last year because the Eagles while they're coming off a victory, the Vikings are not. And they did not look very good in that loss to a team that not many expect to do much this year, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So what exactly are the Eagles going to get with the Vikings? I guess it depends upon your viewpoint. Do they have enough talent to kind of take last week's game and maybe use that as motivation and with their talent be able to beat an Eagles team that could be, reeling a little bit after their performance in the opener against the Patriots? I think a few of the matchups that we're really going to have to focus on here start really number one with Justin Jefferson, the Vikings' number one receiver, maybe even the number one receiver in the entire NFL. Last year, the Eagles were able to keep him in check because they had Darius Slay follow him for most of the game, and then they bracketed a safety over top. So they pretty much doubled him for most of the game, and that worked effectively, and it really made Kirk Cousins struggle throwing the ball, and he ended up tossing 3 interceptions in one of his worst games of the year. So can the Eagles do that again with Slay? Is the new defensive coordinator, Sean Desai, going to follow Jonathan Gannon's blueprint and deploy Slay? Now, the Eagles have some injuries in the secondary that could make that difficult. One being James Bradbury, who's in concussion protocol, unlikely to play as of this taping. So that means that Josh Jobe will step into that role. And I don't know how the Eagles are going to feel about moving around. So Slay may have to play on that one side. The other one is Reed Blankenship. He has some rib injuries. He's questionable as of this taping. And if you don't have Reed, who was clearly their best safety last week, then you're looking at Justin Evans and Terrell Edmonds at the safety position, possibly rookie Sidney Brown. Whoever it is, it's not a great answer. And that was what we saw against, for the most part, against the Patriots, was the middle of the field. Bill Belichick, Mac Jones, quarterback there, attacking the middle, not only the safeties, but also the linebackers, where we have another injury issue, Nakobe Dean. He is definitely out with a foot injury. And that means that it's going to be Christian Ellis and Zach Cunningham and maybe Nicholas Mora in there as well, who's been called up from the practice squad. So the Eagles are light on the defensive side of the ball. Not great, considering where how they played last week. Okay versus that offense, but this is a better offense. Kirk Cousins, Justin Jefferson. Not only do they have those two guys, they have, Jordan Addison at the other receiver spot. They have T.J. Hockenson, who was not yet on the Vikings roster at this point last year, and he's one of the top tight ends in the league. Now, they don't have Dalvin Cook at running back anymore, but they're fine essentially with what they have. And I think that the Eagles will probably do their best to take Jefferson out again and just kind of roll with whatever they got to stop those other two guys in the passing game. On the other side of the ball, new defensive coordinator for the Vikings last year was Ed Donatel, and he did not have a good game plan against the Eagles, and really for a lot of that season when the Vikings did struggle. Flores is from the Bill Belichick school, so the question is whether not only does he have the same scheme, but will he employ the same type of tactics that Bill Belichick used effectively to stop Jalen Hurts and company last week, which is to basically take away those deep throws, no explosive plays, trust your cornerbacks on the outside, and clog the middle of the field, which kept Dallas Goedert in check for the entire game, only one target. Now, Goedert was open a few times and Jalen Hurts missed him, but I think the Eagles will definitely make a concerted effort to get him involved. You should see more of DeAndre Swift at running back. Kenny Gainwell has a rib injury that's likely to keep him out. Swift only got 2 touches last week, which was kind of inexcusable. And then you look at the Eagles' offensive line, which did not have its best outing against the Patriots. Will they be able to kind of improve upon what we saw that first week? Now, the Vikings still have pretty good talent up front. Daniel Hunter. They have Marcus Davenport on the edge as well at secondary linebacker, off-ball linebacker. They have old friend Jordan Hicks, who we know. In the secondary, Harrison Smith. Safety's been there forever. But they got a little more different personnel at the cornerback spot, and I think the Eagles should have an opportunity to attack them outside with A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. I think you're going to expect to see – I would expect those guys to get going in this game. And I don't think Jalen Hurts is going to perform as poorly as did last week. I think you're going to see the Jalen Hurts that we typically we're used to seeing last week. And that's why I'm going to pick the Eagles here to win again against the Vikings in week 2. Have not yet decided on a score at this point. But I think they probably could win relatively comfortably. Vikings, well, I think they're much better than they showed in that first game. They're not quite the team 13-14 that we saw last year, and we saw that in the first round of the playoffs when they got beat by the Giants. And I think talent-wise, we're seeing that already play out here in week 1. So Eagles again, week 2. If they lose this one, then obviously all bets are off, and I'm sure it's going to seem like in Philadelphia that the world is ending. And there's always that possibility, but we're only talking about week 2 here, a long season to go. All right, that's it here from me. Back to you guys at Game Day Central.
Thank you to the Inquirer's Jeff McClain for his thoughts on tonight's game. Jeff picks the Eagles in a victory. Let's go to you guys. Olivia, what was your score prediction for tonight's game in today's edition of the Philadelphia Inquirer?
My score prediction was 28-17 Eagles. That may be on the little lower end for scoring tonight, depending, I don't have a lot of faith really in either of these defenses, but we'll see. It's tough. I definitely felt a lot more confident with my prediction of the Eagles coming out on top last week against the Patriots. This week against the Vikings with so many injuries, it's hard to sit here and say confidently that the Eagles can do this. But that's, if Sean Desai can come out of this with a victory, I think that's going to say a lot about him and the way that this Eagles defense can be resilient and can respond to missing so many starters on that side. So it's an early game, and no, as Jeff said, like the world will not completely explode if the Eagles don't win this game. However, I think that there is a lot to build on if they are able to come out of this game with a win. So it'll definitely be an interesting one tonight.
EJ, kickoff is getting closer. Players are coming out now in their pads to warm up. Jake Elliott's kicking some field goals right in front of us. What is your prediction for tonight's game?
You think Jake would just be like, I did enough kicking a couple of days ago. I'm done. I think that this, I have the Eagles winning 34-27 for starters. I think that there's going to be a lot of points in this game. Predicting Thursday games is always kind of like tricky for me because it feels like every Thursday night game, like weird stuff happens, whatever type of variance you want to call it. I think that the short week, the practice schedule kind of contributes to games sometimes not going exactly how you expect. But that said, if I had to tell you what I think is going to happen, I think the Vikings are going to be able to put up points. I think Justin Jefferson, the Vikings coaching staff is going to look at this and be like, last year we just lined him up against Darius Slay. It didn't work out so well. I think they're going to have a plan. I think they're going to try and get him away from Darius Slay whenever they can. So, I think Minnesota is going to be able to put up points. I know the Eagles offense struggled in the opener, but I think they're going to be able to put up points against this Vikings defense as well. There's some household names in this group, and I think Brian Flores is a good coach, but at the same time, I think that the Eagles just have such an advantage in so many spots. So I think it's going to be a shootout. I could see the Vikings getting out to an early lead. I could see the Eagles getting out to an early lead. I think the game script might be a little weird, but I think by the time that this game's over, the Eagles will be 2-0 and getting ready for another weird week, another long week going to Tampa Bay. So.
All right, it's going to be a clean sweep here from the Game Day Central crew. I'm also picking the Eagles in a 33-24 victory for many of the reasons both of you guys stated earlier. All right, rapid fire. Give me one player to watch out for. EJ, I'm going back to you.
I'm going to go with Darius Slay and Josh Jobe. I'm going to steal two. Jobe with the matchup against Addison is going to be big, but I am curious to see where Slay is on the field and how he does against Justin Jefferson. We should add he was really good against the Patriots, like one of his better games, and it's like always reassuring to see with an aging cornerback, to have that recovery speed and that playmaking ability.
Olivia, who is your player to watch out for in tonight's Week 2 matchup?
My eyes will be on Dallas Goedert. Will he have more than 0 catches? My guess is yes, he will. However, how many more than 0? And will he have any touchdowns? I'm sure that they will want to try to get him involved early and often throughout this game.
Olivia, exactly a year ago, Devontae Smith did not have a catch Week 1 at Detroit. The very next game against the Vikings in Week 2. First play of the game, Devontae Smith out route for an easy reception. I think Dallas Goedert also will get involved early. My player to watch, EJ picks Darius Slay, Josh Jobe, Olivia with Dallas Goedert. I'm going with Jalen Carter, the rookie. He obviously had his first sack last week, but not just that. He's going up against a banged up Vikings interior offensive line, and we saw 6 pressures. It depends where you look. Some places had him with 6 pressures. Some had him with 8. Regardless, very, very effective in his NFL debut. And in limited time, only 40 snaps. He could become the first rookie defensive tackle since Ndamukong Suh over a decade ago to have 2 sacks in his first 2 games. That's some pretty good company. And it's been historically noted how difficult it is to come along as a rookie specifically at defensive tackle. I'm going with Jalen Carter. Olivia, any final thoughts here before we get wrapped up?
One last thought. We have a question up from NP over on YouTube. They want to know if this game will be on any of the local channels. As you know, you can watch this game on Amazon. It's a Thursday night game. Obviously, it is Thursday night. But if you are local to the Philadelphia area, this game is also on Fox 29. So hopefully maybe that helps someone out there.
There you go, Olivia, helping our viewers back home to transition, where they'll be able to watch the game. EJ, any final thoughts before this Thursday night matchup?
No final thoughts. I'm just excited for this game to get started.
All right, here we are, week 2. The season is in full go. It is time to wrap up here at Gameday Central. Thank you so much for tuning in to Inquire Live at Gameday Central, sponsored by Xfinity. Make sure you stick around at inquire.com/Eagles Gameday to follow along with all of us, the 4 of us here at Gameday Central. In addition to our columnists, Mike Sealski, Marcus Hayes, all here on site to cover tonight's game. We'll be able to interact with you over there at our Gameday Central homepage. Next week, next Monday, EJ hinted at it, we'll be coming to you live from Tampa. For EJ Smith, Olivia Reiner, I am Josh Tolentino. Thank you so much for tuning in to Gameday Central. Enjoy tonight's matchup.